Hi, everybody. This is Ann Patchett at Parnassus Books. Thank you for listening to Parnassus Presents. Your support allows us to keep bringing you fantastic events. So please consider purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book at the link below. We hope you enjoy the event, recorded live from the Parnassus stage.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. It is so amazing to see such a great crowd tonight. There's like barely any empty seats. That's amazing. My name is RJ Witherow. I'm the events manager here at Parnassus Books, and I am so excited to bring you tonight's author. Elizabeth Bass Parman is a local. She's also a debut author here for the Empress of Cooke County. So please join me in welcoming Elizabeth to the stage.
Thank you so much. Oh, she wants to see her honey. Bless her. Hi, everyone. That was my sweet Charlotte calling for her honey. I'd like to begin tonight by thanking Parnassus Books for allowing me to be here tonight. This is a dream come true for me. I have thought about it, imagined it for years, and to have it finally here is so exciting. And thank you to RJ and to all the wonderful booksellers here for being such a wonderful place for Nashville to have for the book community. I also want to thank all of you all for coming out tonight. I know everybody's busy, but I see that y'all are here, and I appreciate it so much, and thank each and every one of you for coming to hear us tonight. I have wanted to be a writer since I was 4 years old, and that date is official. Shortly after my 4th birthday, my parents had a cocktail party, and when it was time for my sisters and me to go to bed, my parents always wanted us to come and say goodnight to all the guests in our little Lance of Salzburg nightgowns. And I don't know if we were the only ones who had to do that. Thanks, Mom, for that. But anyway, we would come out. I'm sure we were adorable, and we would say goodnight to the guests. And so I went over to one guest that I knew, Don Elliott. I remember this very distinctly. I remember where he was standing. And he said, "So, I hear you had a birthday." And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "So you're 4? "Yes, sir. I turned 4 last week." He goes, "So what did you pick?" And I was very confused. I said, "I'm sorry, what?" He goes, "Your career. What did you pick?" And that deer in the headlights look, and he said, now he was probably 2 martinis in, but little 4-year-old me did not know that. And he looks down at me and says, "Everyone knows that when you turn 4, you have to decide what you're going to be when you grow up." And I still remember that panic, and I'm like, oh gosh, I did not know that. And I'm thinking, my sister was 7 at the time. Why didn't she tell me this? No heads up. And I had to say, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, you're already late," which I realized as I was working on this, probably those of you all who know me know that I hate to be late. And I think this might be where it's from, because I was so traumatized that I was late with something that was very important. So I spent the whole next day worrying about it. And then I go to my mom, who's right here, and Mom knows nothing of this conversation. And I said, "Mom, I have 2 questions." She goes, "Okay." I said, "Are princesses real?" And she says, "Some are." Okay, that's good. I said, "And where do books come from?" She said, "Well, people write them." Okay, that's good. I said, "All right, I've decided I'm either going to be an author or a princess." And she's like, "Okay, great, honey." She didn't know, but I committed then, and it took, the princess thing didn't really work out, although my husband might disagree. But the author thing did work out, although it did take quite a few years. The process was not an easy one to get published. I had always written, kept a notebook and made little character sketches and ideas for stories, and I worked a lot on my pen names. That was going to be important somehow to me. But I always had a little notebook going and always had some ideas and enjoyed that. And of course was always reading voraciously. And then when I got to be 40, I thought, okay, girl, you're 40. If you are going to actually be a writer and publish novels, you'd better actually go write a novel. And so I thought, okay, we'll do that. So I was working full-time, I think, at that point, and raising my family, but I also started writing a novel. And I finished it and was very proud of it and started querying it. You're sending it off to literary agents, hoping that they will pick you out of the slush pile and publish you, and then you live happily ever after. So I queried that first novel, and I got a whole lot of rejections. Well, that's okay. Nobody really hits it right away, so I didn't give up. And well, I gave up on that book, which probably I should have, although it's a good idea. And Becky, we'll talk about that idea sometime, because the idea is good. The writing was not good enough. But it was, anyway, I wrote the book, queried it, and got a lot of rejections. But the bug had bit me, and I was ready to try again. So I wrote a second novel, and I started querying that. And I got more interest in that, and I had a lot of positive feedback. But there was always that however at the end. Thank you for sending your submission. I enjoyed the story, great writing. I love the plot line. You know, the plot was great. However, I'm not going to offer representation to you. And so I got to really dread that however, and I got a whole lot of them. But that's okay. I was trying, and I'm very stubborn. I did get what they call an R&R, a revise and resubmit. And I was so excited about that. The agent, she was a very big deal agent, and she had written me a very long and personalized note about this book. And she said, I love this story, but it's not quite ready. And I want you to change this. If you're willing to change this and this and this, let me look at it again. Awesome. That's great. I said, this is it. So I do what she says, and I go to send it to her. She's closed to submissions. Well, that doesn't mean me, right? Because it was the R&R. And so I emailed her office, and I said, well, actually, she asked for this. And they're like, she's closed to submissions. I'm like, okay. Then I had another agent who said, you know, dear Elizabeth, thank you so much for your submission. What a charming book. It is delightful. The voice, the plot, the characters, it's great. However, and I'm like, oh. But then she said, I am certain this will be published. And when it does come out, please send me an autographed copy. Well, I cried. Because if it was, and I tried to grow that thick skin that you're supposed to have if you're a writer, and I'm like, okay, I can handle this. But when she asked for the free autographed copy, where I'm paying the postage, I'm like, I did cry. And spoiler, I have not sent her a copy. But it's available, and she can go to her local bookstore and order it. So I ended up shelving that one, which did it did break my heart, but I kept going, and I started my third book, The Empress of Cooke County. So I thought, well, this is the best one yet. I finished it, I polished it, I started querying it, and I got some interest, but not a whole lot. But I was getting a lot of the thank you for the submission, but form letters, but I did get some what they call personalized rejections that are somehow, in theory, supposed to be really great. that they will reject you personally instead of just sending you the blanket email. But still, no offers on it. But I believed in this book. I dreamed about this book. I talked about this book all the time. My poor husband was listening to plot ideas. Well, what if I change it to this? He's like, okay, yeah, try that. But nothing, I never got the final, let's talk on the phone, what they call the call. I never got that. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to shelve this, I think. But I kept an eye out on social media and people's manuscript wish lists, all the things, to try to find the right agent, because I thought all I need is the right agent. So I kind of kept an eye out for that, but I shelved it, and I started a new book, a fourth book, because I'm not going to give up. And then I went to my book club, a meeting, and a lot of y'all were there, and I'm so glad that you all are here tonight, and thank you so much for coming out, and I hope you remember this. I did not realize that one of our book club members was childhood friends with the author whose book we had read that month, and that she was Zooming in to talk about it, and that was very exciting. And so there I am with my friends at the book club, and we're going to talk about this wonderful book. And she says, she zooms in and she says, well, wait, I want to know who I'm talking to. And so we passed the laptop around, and everyone said their name and passed on to the group. And it came to me, and I said, hi, I'm Elizabeth. And somebody, I think it was Kathy Hendren, I'm not sure. Was it Kathy? She said, tell her you're a writer. Well, that's like telling Picasso, oh, I paint. And I'm like, no, but then they're like, go ahead. And so I said, oh, I'm a querying writer, pray for me. That's what I'm doing. She goes, oh, well, maybe I can help you. And I'm like, well, that would be awesome. And she said, get with our mutual friend who's here tonight and have her give you my assistant's contact information and send me info on your book. And then she said something completely unnecessary, don't make me ask you twice. No, ma'am, you do not have to ask me twice. And so I got her contact information and sent off an email to the assistant, Andrea, who is lovely. And I said, this is what happened, and she told me to email you. And I got back a lovely email, yes, we know all about, thank you so much. So the very next day, I am having lunch in my kitchen, and my phone rings. It's a number I don't recognize, and typically I don't answer the phone when I don't recognize the number, but for some reason I picked it up, and it was the author. And she said, Elizabeth, and and she said her name, and I haven't asked for her permission to say, so I won't say who it is, but she said, here's what we're gonna do. She said, you've got a great book. I love what you sent me, because I had sent her a synopsis and the pitch for it, the elevator pitch. She said, it's great. She goes, I know exactly the right agent for you, and I called her this morning, and I told her that you're going to send it to her. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I've got my little sandwich in my hand, and she goes, yeah, I've already talked to her. She loves the idea. She wants to send it, so go ahead and send it to her, and when you do, be sure to say, this is the one that I had told you about. And I'm like, holy cow, okay, I will do that. And so I had gotten other referrals before, and those are really great to have, but this one felt different. And I sent it off in the mail, and then, long story short, it was Kathy Schneider was the agent she picked out at Jane Retrosin, and Kathy loved the book. And she said, can we have a call? And there was no however. And I said, yes, absolutely. And she calls. And somehow in my heart, I thought, well, it's going to be an R&R, because she starts talking about some things that need to be worked on, and the pacing, and what about this character. And I'm thinking, okay, it's an R&R, that's awesome. I'll take the R&R. And then at the end of our conversation, she said, may I represent you? And I don't think I've ever said yes so fast in my life. And I said, yes, please. And she said, great. And we hung up the phone, and I thought, did I just get an agent? And Steve was home, and I came downstairs, and I said, I think I have an agent. And he had been in the kitchen and heard the conversation. He goes, you did get an agent, Elizabeth. It'd been decades, literally decades, and I just was not sure that it had actually happened, but he promised me that it did. And then I got the paperwork and all the forms and all of the signatures, and then I realized, well, yes, indeed, I do have an agent. So Kathy and I work on the manuscript, and it's polished up and it's ready to go. She sends out a lucky 13 queries to publishers, and the number 13 comes into play quite a bit in the Empress of Cooke County. One of my main characters, Posey, has a horror of all things 13. And I thought, no, the 13 thing, that's good for this. And so she sends out 13 queries. And then the next week, I get an email. She said, we got 13 requests. And I said, does that mean something different for agents? Because when writers get requests, it means they want to read the manuscript. And she's like, Elizabeth, yes, they've all asked to read the manuscript. Very exciting. So she sends it all off, and I'm so excited. And then I get a call, Elizabeth, an editor wants to Zoom call with you and me next week. Can you do this on Tuesday or whatever? I don't care what I was doing on Tuesday. That was getting canceled. Yes, thank you. I would love to do that. Then I get another phone call. We have a second agent or a second publisher who's interested in talking to you through Zoom. Can we do that? I said, yes, absolutely. So we had 2 appointments, and Kathy was going to be on the call with me, the publisher and my agent, Kathy, and myself, and that was very good hand-holding for her because I was so nervous, but it went great. And we had the 2 calls, and then and I thought, oh, I've got 2 people who are interested. Then she called me and said, Elizabeth, what are you doing next Monday? I'm like, nothing. And she said, great, let's Zoom with this other publisher. And I'm like, what? And she said, yeah, let's do that. I'm like, okay, so we had 3 Zoom calls. And they took place, and they were great, and I was very excited. And then she calls me, Elizabeth, would you be willing to meet in person with a team from Harper Muse for coffee? Yes, I would be willing to do that. And she said, great, there's 3 of them, and they want to talk to you. They want to meet at this coffee shop. And I said, Kathy, that's great. But she says, I can't be with you, though, but you've done great on all the other Zoom calls. You're going to be fine, but I can't fly down to Nashville to hold your hand for this meeting. Will you be okay? And I said, yes, I think I can handle it. So I said, Kathy, one question. Why are there 3? Did I do something where it takes 3 of them to talk to me about it? And she said, no, they just want to meet you. Don't worry about it. So off we go to coffee, and that's where I met Becky Mons, my editor. And I fell in love that day. Amanda Bostic was there, Nikisha was there. And I thought, well, this is amazing. And I left just floating out of the coffee shop thinking, what a dream if they make an offer on the book. Then I get another call, Elizabeth, we have an offer from one of the Zoom calls. And then we had a second offer, and then we got a third offer, and then we got a 4th offer. She said, Elizabeth, we're having a bidding war. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And she said, nothing, just don't do anything. Just wait and let me handle it. I'm like, well, I said, don't make anybody mad. And she said, I'm not going to make them mad, but I'm going to try to get you the best deal I can. And I'm like, Kathy, don't make them mad, please. I don't want anybody to say, well, forget it. It's just, no, we'll go find the other 8,000 authors who want to be published. But nobody got mad, or if they did, I didn't hear about it. And Kathy said, all right, well, we had the offers, and she said, now it's time to choose who you want. And all of a sudden, everything kind of changed because all of these editors that I had talked with were lovely, and they had visions for the book, and they were each so excited about it in their own different way. But I knew what I wanted, and I said, Kathy, I already know. And she goes, yeah, I know. And I said, let's take the Harper Muse deal. And she said, good. So we did that, and I signed more paperwork and was just over the moon. Unbelievable that this had happened. So then it was time to get to work, and I had no idea what all went into once you finish the paperwork part of it. I thought you took the manuscript and sort of fed it like fax machine style, and it came out, it went through the publishing magic thing that they had, and it would come out ready to be published, and that is not what happens. So the first thing they did was right away I got something that they call the AID, I think Author Information Document, is that it? Something like that. Okay. So that's what they called it, but I called it a test that I had not studied for. It was a 4-page document full of questions about the book, and I didn't know this was coming, but I thought, well, I should be okay, right? Because the topic is the Empress of Cooke County, and I'm good on that. So I started writing the answers. The first one was, did you have any other title thoughts, any other alternative titles you'd considered? Well, no, the Empress of Cooke County was the first. I had the title before I had the story. No, I don't want to change that. That's what I want. I'm like, okay, I know that. Okay, so I got that one. That's good. Then they said, who is your typical reader? Describe her in detail. And they said, like, what food she eats, what she wears, her hobbies, what magazines are on her coffee table, her hobbies. Is she married? Does she have children? Is she not? Does she have pets? I'm like, my goodness, okay. But then I thought, you know what? I am an author. I can handle this. So I made up this woman who was my typical reader, and I described her in this AID, and I had her whole backstory, and I had some conflict. She had a goal, and I thought, all right, I'm totally getting an A on this test/AID. And then it came to the next question, do you have any cover ideas? Yes, I do. And I had two. The first one was picturing a house that you first think looks like it belongs on Southern Living magazine cover. Beautiful white 2-story with the boxwoods, the whole thing. But if you look closely, you'd see that the paint was chipping and that the front porch was sagging a little bit and things just weren't quite right. And then in the window, looking out of the house onto where the reader would be looking, would be a possum on his back legs with his little paws looking out the window with the expression I remember writing, he looks like he knows things. And I thought, well, that would be a very cool cover. And then my second idea was Posey at the Curly Q Beauty Shop, which is what we have right here. So this is Posey in a 1960s small town beauty shop. And if you look closely on this one, you'll see she's got a little flask of gin in her purse. She's got on her sunglasses, her Jackie Kennedy sunglasses, and she's got on her signature Scarlet Scandal lipstick. And if you Google the Empress Tarot card, you might realize that there is a similarity between the two. So I wrote down Posey in the beauty shop in the Curly Q because the Curly Q was the center of the action in the story. It's great. So I'm like, I'm acing this AID thing, doing great. But then it came to the last question. What is the theme of your book? Now, I am an English major. We live for this stuff. I wrote pages and pages, tests and essays about themes of books I did not even read in college. Heart of Darkness, never read it, can totally talk about the theme of that book. But I had no answer for this. It was the last question. I had nothing. What is the theme of my book? I have no idea. I'm like, but I wrote it. Shouldn't I know? I'm like, well, you should, but I had no ideas. So when I get stuck in my writing, what I do is go for a walk. And so I decided, all right, I'll just go for a walk and figure this out. My first idea was not that great. Don't get too big for your britches. I thought, well, that's probably not what they want, and I don't think I want to put that down anyway. I'm like, okay, so we're not doing that. I thought, all right, what else could there be? How about be true to yourself? Okay, that's better, but it wasn't right. So I'm walking my neighborhood all 10,000 steps before I finally figured out that I had literally written it out on a brass plaque on the door of the house that Posey inherits. Love conquers all. That was the theme of my book. And so I finished my AID. Love conquers all is the theme. Then it was time for the blurbs. And Becky says to me, and Becky, I keep pointing to her, Becky Mons, my fantastic editor right there. Becky says, I want you to dream big. I'm like, oh, I'm good at that. And she said, who would you most want in the whole world to blurb your book? Well, obviously, Fannie Flagg. I said, Fannie Flagg would be the ultimate. She says, okay, we're going to write to her. I'm like, when you say we, do you mean like Harper Muse? And she goes, no, I mean you and me. We're writing to her. And so I wrote a very heartfelt note to her about what it would mean to me that she liked my, first of all, she's reading my book, which was crazy. But if she gave me a blurb, it would be such a highlight of my life. And we sent a little stuffed cat toy possum. It wasn't stalking because I just looked her up on Google and I saw she was a cat person. So I'm like, I tracked down a cat toy possum and put it in the box, and I also sent her some toffee and my note, and Becky put her note in there and we sent it. I said, Becky, I'm gonna make you a deal. If Fannie Flagg says yes, I owe you a bottle of champagne. Okay. So weeks go by and hadn't heard anything. That's fine. The phone rings and it's Becky. She says, Elizabeth, you owe me a bottle of champagne. I said, what are you doing to me, Becky? And I said, if this is a joke, this is not good. I'm not good with jokes. And she said, no, she loved your book. And I remember fumbling for a seat because I had been standing up and my knees were buckling. I said, are you sure? And she said, I just hung up the phone with her. And I'm like, you talked to Fannie Flagg? And she said, yes. And I said, and you talked about my book? And she said, yes. She loved it, and she's writing your blurb. Well, that was fantastic. And so I go to meet Becky to pay up. We met at like 8 a.m. in a church parking lot. And I had a bottle of Veuve Clicquot in my hand, and I handed it over. I said, I pay up on my bets. But then she handed me something, and it was an advance reader copy. She'd gotten an early one, and I had it in my hands, my book. And I got back in my car, and I just had to sit with it for a minute. Traffic is whizzing by, and I'm sure people are going, why is this woman crying? Because that's what was happening in this parking lot at 8 o'clock in the morning. But it was me holding that book. I have that book. I will always have that book, and I treasure it. That moment of holding that first one was amazing. And I have notes because sometimes I get off track and I don't want to do that. The Empress of Cooke County was born in a doctor's office. I had taken my mom to go see the doctor, and I have her and Pocahontas to thank for the idea. There's a story in our family that we are descendants of Pocahontas. I don't know if that's true. It would be super cool if it was. I don't know. But anyway, that's what the story is in the family. And we were talking about that, and Mom said, "Did you know she was called the Empress of Virginia?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." And then they called Mom to come back, and I was in the waiting room, and I thought, well, that is a good title. I thought, but I don't really have a connection to Virginia. What about the Empress of Tennessee? And I'm like, well, Tennessee is a big state. It's got 98 counties. I can't do the whole. But then I thought, what if it's just one county? What if there's a woman who wants to control everything in her little county? So I'm thinking, this is good. And then I'm like, well, what's the difference really between a queen and an empress? I knew an empress was better, but I wasn't sure exactly why. So I Googled it, and I found out what it was with the empress, how Queen Elizabeth was not an empress, but Queen Victoria was, and got that straightened out. But then the next entry was the Empress Tarot card, and I looked at it, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't know a thing about it. And I read what the description was, and it said when the Empress is pulled upright from the deck, it's all the good things in the world. But when she's pulled upside down or reversed, it's all these bad things. It's the opposite. And then it was like lightning. I've never had this happen before or since, but most of the story came to me in about 10 minutes. And I literally held on to my chair because my brain couldn't keep up with what was flowing in about one woman who was the Empress upright and one woman who was the Empress reversed, a mother and a daughter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great idea. I wonder if I can pull this off. And I went home that night and started writing The Empress of Cooke County about a mother who is the Empress reversed, who thinks that she is the rightful Empress of Cooke County, and her daughter, Callie Jane, who is the Empress upright, but she doesn't know it yet. So that is where the title and the story came from, all born in that doctor's office. And ideas for books come from everywhere for me, and I am what I call an active listener. Some people call it eavesdropping, and I think that's unattractive, and I'm just being an active listener. And I hear bits of things, and I'm like, I have a notebook, and I write it all down. I'm like, oh, okay, I can use that. I was at one of the fruit stands a few summers ago, and I'm buying my tomatoes, and I had paid and was getting my keys in my hand to go to my car, and the man behind me was paying, and he said, "That's quite a scar on your arm." And the woman doing the cash register said, "Oh, that's where my sofa shot me." I had to pretend for 10 minutes that I could not find the keys that were in my hand so I could hear the story. And it's a great story, and it's going to turn up one day, and I'm ready to use it. And then Steve and I were driving home from our place in Canada, and on the interstate, we passed a church right on the interstate, and I misread the sign, the name of the church, and I thought, that is a very odd name for a church. Well, I had misread it, but the misread church name is going to show up in a book because I'm like, that would be some kind of church with the name that I had misread because it was in cursive and we're going pretty fast. So I misread it. But I like to just be aware of what's going on. Stories are about people, and I like to talk to people. I will talk to anybody, anywhere, and enjoy hearing what everyone has to say. But fair warning, if you are on your phone in a slow checkout line at the grocery, and you're on your phone telling your business, I might scoot up a little bit and hear what's going on. And that's not unattractive. That's being an active listener. So that is my public service announcement for all of you all. So what comes next? Well, that bidding war that happened, somewhere in it, and I'm not sure exactly where, it turned into 2 books. Because Kathy started, my agent, was saying, well, with the second book, and I'm like, there is no second book. And she goes, well, there's gonna be because it's a 2-book deal. And I'm like, what? And she said, yes, it's a 2-book deal. Okay, so I have a 2-book deal, so I have to write the second book. So what I've done is I took minor characters from the Empress of Cooke County. You will meet them just very briefly, and I'm making them the main characters in the next story. But I was really worried because I adore my Harper Muse family, and I didn't want to let anyone down. I'd never written a book for someone. I mean, they were already, essentially, they'd already bought it because it was a 2-book deal. So I call up Becky again, poor Becky. She does not have me blocked as far as I know on the phone. I'm like, okay, Becky, we got to talk. I've got this idea. It's kind of crazy. Can we meet? And so we met, and I said, okay, it's not going to be a sequel, but it's going to be the second book in the Spark series 3 years later. In this with some of the same people, but with these minor characters, they're going to be the main characters. And I said, in the story, it's going to be different. I said, do you know that Kenny Loggins song, Return to Pooh Corner? And she's like, yes, I do. And it's, if you don't know the song, it's lovely. You should listen to it. But it's about a man who had a little Pooh doll or animal when he was young, and he grew up and had put it aside, the childish things. But then when he had his son, he brought the Pooh back out and gave it to his son. And the Pooh talked to him and said, welcome back. And I've always loved that song. I said, okay, so here's the story. It's Return to Pooh Corner, but with Appalachian witches. And we're in our little coffee shop where we meet, and she's like, okay, go write that. So I have, and I turned in the second draft to her last week, and I haven't gotten any phone calls about, oh, we need to talk. So I hope that's going well. So that is coming hopefully next year. And RJ, I like to be early about things, and I came in here way early asking, could I please have this dream event? And RJ was like, yes, we can do that, which was fabulous. So RJ, just FYI, I'll be calling saying, all right, I need a spot. So before I take questions, I want to ask that second favor of you all, and then I want to read my favorite passage from the book. The second favor is I'm going to be signing you all's books, and I want you all to sign my book. I've written in the front Parnassus Books with the date, and if you all afterwards would just sign your name or a smiley face or just whatever, a little note somewhere in the front, that would mean a lot to me. I'm going to collect these when I go to book events, and this will help me remember how special this night was. So RJ has a plan. I'm not sure what their plan is, but we trust RJ, and they will figure it out for us and tell you all what to do. But after I read, it'll be this book that you all will sign for me. So I'm going to take questions at the end, but let me read you this passage, and I'll set it up for you. There has been an ice storm in the town of Spark, and all of the electricity has gone out, and Callie Jane, the daughter, is stranded at her father's emporium, his junk shop. And she's just resigned herself to a very cold night in the shop. She's pulled a blanket down off a shelf. She's going to curl up in the recliner and try to sleep, waiting for the power to come back on. So she's just settled in when there's a knock on the door, on the back door. She answers it, and it's Evangeline. Now, Evangeline has just moved to town. She's a hairdresser who works next door at the Curly Q beauty shop. Evangeline is a Yankee. And everyone's a little nervous about her. No Yankee has ever been in Spark, much less lived there, but yet here she is. And it's Evangeline at the back door. And Evangeline says, I live very close to here. I saw your candle. You're going to freeze to death if you sleep in the store. Why don't you come home with me? I have a big fireplace. We can at least be warm, and I can fix us some soup over the fire. And Callie Jane agrees. So she's curious about this Evangeline person who's come into town, and she starts asking questions. And it's a night for truth-telling. Callie Jane confesses a few things and starts to realize how young and naive she is compared to Evangeline, who has moved to Spark completely by herself. So she's asking about that, and she says, well, I have a girlfriend named Becky. And see, it's Becky. Now it sounds like I'm stalking you, but and I had offered to change the name because my editor is Becky. She said, no, it's fine. So she said, Evangeline says, I have a girlfriend named Becky back in Ohio. Her mom has dementia, and we both decided it would be too upsetting to move her from the place that she lives and knows well. And so Becky is going to stay in Ohio with her mom until she passes, and then when she does, Becky's going to join me here in Spark. But for now, she's staying in Ohio, taking care of her mom with dementia. And then Evangeline says, I love a woman. Are you okay with that? And Callie Jane is, of course, okay with that. And so Evangeline takes a picture down from the mantle, and this has my favorite line in it. Evangeline took a photo of a smiling woman with curly brown hair from the mantle and handed it to Callie Jane. I knew I was in love with her about 2 years ago when I saw her spreading a bag of leaves her mom had raked up back over their lawn. Her mama loved yard work and cried when the leaves were gone, so Becky made sure the leaves were never gone. I say this story that I've written is about the power of love, and to me that is such an example of it, and it is a true story. My across-the-street neighbor, Katie Jordan, had dementia, and one evening about twilight in the fall, I saw her husband spreading leaves out over the yard, and then the next day, Mrs. Jordan was out raking them up. Then that night, I saw Mr. Jordan spreading the leaves back out. Then the next day, I saw Mrs. Jordan raking those same leaves back up. So one day, I saw him at the mailbox, and Mr. Jordan had had a stroke, and he was not able to walk very well. He had a pronounced limp, and he didn't have full use of the right side of his body. So I went to the mailbox and I said, Mr. Jordan, I see you spreading leaves back over the yard. And then I see Mrs. Jordan raking them up. And he goes, that's right. He said, Katie loves yard work. She loves raking leaves, and I love Katie. And I thought, well, that is amazing. And it's stories like that are the reason that I write, so that I can share things like that with you all. So I will take questions if anyone has one.
So Elizabeth,
Wanda?
does 1480 Creekside Road have any special significance?
Well, it does. As I mentioned earlier, Posey has a fear of all things 13, and it's explained in the book why. And I'll point out, I was born on the 13th, and I remember going to Mom and saying, Mom, this is very bad. The 13 is a bad number. She goes, no, it's good luck when you're born on the 13th. Okay, thanks. But Posey, something very difficult, traumatic happened to her on a 13th of a month. And I didn't give Posey anything. As a matter of fact, I tortured her through the whole book. And if you add up 1480, you will find 13. And you might notice a few other times we did that. If there's a number, add it up and see if it's 13. And let's be glad I had an editor to check my math to make sure that indeed it was 13 and not like 12 or 15, whatever. But that adds up to 13 because that is not going to bring her any joy. Had fun with it. Yes, Paige.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Paige.
How did you keep going after years of rejections and just after many years of writing and slogging through it all? What was your tenacity? How did you keep going?
Well, I'm very stubborn, but I also took breaks. It was not a constant thing where I always had a novel going. I took short breaks. I took long breaks, and I mourned a few times, the times that I thought, oh, this is it. This is going to be my agent. I can just tell, and then it wasn't. And it's okay to stop writing for a while. I know that there's advice you have to write every day. No, you don't. You do whatever you want. And if you need to not write for a while, then don't write. And so, that's what worked for me. But I always came back to it, and I knew that that was my dream. And I had a commitment to Don Elliott from when I was 4 that so I had to hold that up. But I just kept going, and I thought, well, the only way I know I won't succeed is to give up. And then I have guaranteed myself failure. So I better keep going. And so I did.
Oh gosh, okay, that would be great if we did. What would you tell your 4-year-old self now, looking back?
Okay, don't make me cry, Rhea. I would say it's all gonna work out. Hang in there, and there's going to be some tough stuff ahead, but just hang in there and don't give up on this dream. And you've made me cry. But that's what I tell her. Yes.
It might be hard for you to pick, but do you have a favorite character in this book?
Oh, I do. It's very easy for me to pick. I love Evangeline, the Yankee who comes into town. She is so different from the men and women of Spark, and I loved how different she was. She is no nonsense. She doesn't gossip at all. And at one point, Callie Jane asks her a question that kind of needs her to be gossipy, and she is not going to answer that. And Callie Jane finally said, you just have to tell me the answer to this. And she does tell her. But, oh, yeah, you're not supposed to have favorites, I think. Or is it okay with, I know with children you're not, but, and I love you both equally. My 2 girls are here. But it's Evangeline. I think she's great. And she's not in the next book, but it's only the second draft. We may find a way to work her in.
I'd be curious to know about your first 2 novels. Do you think they'll ever be resurrected or revised and returned?
Well, maybe. The first one, it's a really cool idea. I like the idea. The writing was not strong enough, but I could rewrite it. But I will need some help with some permissions for that I had not known about when I first wrote it. So maybe on that one. The second one actually is turning into book 2 for Harper Muse. I did a major rewrite on it. I changed the main character's age. I made her older. I changed a lot of the circumstances. She's now a married 24-year-old woman. Before she was a teenager. So I changed probably about 75% of it, but in a way, it's still the same book.
So, and congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, what's your favorite part of the process? Beginning like a new, fresh idea, or wrapping it up, or what is your favorite?
It's That's a good question. I think, well, my favorite part of Empress was that 10 minutes in the waiting room where I'm like, what in the world is happening? Because the whole story was coming. But typically what I love is the second draft, where you've told yourself the story in the first draft. You kind of know what's the major points and what's going to happen. You've thought about it, you know the story pretty well, but there still needs to be a lot of polishing and going in and going, ooh, I can have her say this, or what if I change it where this happens, where you can just tweak it a little bit. And that's before it goes into the editorial process where other people are involved. And that in their insight and their thoughts are so valuable, but when you're sitting alone with this laptop typing and nobody's seen the story yet, it's just you, and you can go in and put a little touch here or this cool idea over here. I love that before the reality of the editorial process where you get your line editor, your content editor, the acquiring editor, all the editors, and they all have ideas, and that I welcome them because you need that. But before anybody else gets a hold of it, while it's still your baby, you can polish it a little bit. Okay, is that all our questions? Thank you all so much for coming out. This means so much to me.